Hello everyone, thanks for joining me here on JKD Handmade. For this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to work pockets on your raglan. So here's a look at these pockets. This is an easy tutorial. It's actually a follow-up from my tutorial on that basic raglan that I had shared a few weeks back. So I'm going to assume that you have watched that tutorial because I'm just following up on it. Like when it comes to the neckline of the raglan, the yoke, the sleeves, and going down to part of the body, I'm going to assume that you already know how to work those because it is exactly the same as I had shown you in that tutorial. And then for working pockets on raglans, you also need to work a hidden seam. So I've got that tutorial uploaded as well. I've got the links to both these tutorials in the description box below. So if you haven't checked it out, you can do so there as well. So talking about the seam, it's a hidden seam. And the reason we want a hidden seam is so that we can get our seam right at the underarm and thereafter work our seam down this. That would help us eventually get to a point where we can work 2 layers on this sweater. So as we get into this tutorial, you'll understand what I mean by that. For this tutorial, you'll use the same hook that you use for most of your sweater. So it was the bigger of the 2 hooks, as I explained in that tutorial for a basic raglan. Like in my case, I'm using a worsted weight yarn here. So I'm using my 6mm hook for this, for the pockets as well. And then you also need stitch markers. You'll need a pair of scissors and you'll need a yarn or a wool needle. Okay, so let's get on with this tutorial. To work a raglan with pockets, you will work a basic raglan, but this time you're working it with a hidden seam. So you have your seam running down the corner on your yoke, and then you're working from side all the way around to side. So your start and end will be at this side. So you continue on with your raglan as I did for the basic pattern. Obviously, this one is with the hidden seam. You'll continue on until you've worked your raglan to the length where you'd like your pockets. Now, I fitted this on. It's actually my second sweater dress. The first one was without pockets, and here I'm making one with pockets. So I fitted this on, and at this point, this part reaches my upper hip. So you'll decide where you want your pockets, at which length on your body you'd want your pockets, and you'll work your raglan to that length. And thereafter, now you'll see here, this is my starting and ending point right there. So on the opposite side, with this raglan laid out flat, on the opposite side, I've placed a stitch marker right here. So this runs along straight up here. There's the side of my raglan, and on that side, here's the side of my raglan. So on either side, I've got my start here, and I've got a stitch marker on this side. Now for a while, we'll be working our raglan in parts, the front and the back. So you work from side to side, then back again, side to side, side to side, and then you can fasten off. And on the other side as well, you will attach yarn and you work from side to side until you've worked enough to form the opening of these pockets. Okay, so continuing on from where I had stopped, I'm going to chain 2 and turn, and then I'm just working my stitch pattern to that stitch marker. So I'll work all the way to that stitch marker on the opposite side. I've continued on, and here's my start. That's my start there. I've worked those stitches, and here I am on the opposite side. I've worked my last stitch into the stitch before the one marked off by the stitch marker. So for my next round, it's chain 2 and turn. Now I'm working back this way again. So it's my stitches all the way to that starting point. I've continued on, so all I've done was repeat that round back and forth, and this is on the 1/2 of my sweater. I've actually got my sweater facing the wrong way up, so here's that the neckline and here's that bottom edge. So I worked from the start to my stitch marker back and forth. So at this point, the width of this opening on my pocket, it fits my hand, as you see here. So you've got to make sure that the width is able to fit your hand, the width of your hand. Then once you've got that, you can fasten off. Oh yes, one other thing. When you're working back and forth, make sure that when you're working right at the end, you make sure that you work your last stitch into that second chain from your chain 2, because remember our chain 2s count as stitches, and if you don't work your stitch, you'll find your pattern going askew. So make sure to work that last stitch into the second chain from chain 2. Then it's fastened off, and you can cut off on the excess yarn. Now we'll work this portion on this side of our raglan. So right at that stitch marker where we've marked it off, you can attach yarn. And then again, you're working your chain 2, 1, 2, and here you're working your stitches. You'll work all the way to this side here. You'll finish off into that stitch before our start from the round on the opposite side. So that will be the stitch before there. And then it's turn, chain 2, and you're working back and forth on this side of your raglan. I've continued on. So this is my front. Here's that portion, and here's my back. The back is worked to the same length as that of the front. If you look at it, this portion forms the pocket opening on the one side, and here's the pocket opening on the other side. Make certain that your hand is able to fit into those openings, as mine is here. Now we'll continue on. This time we're working in the round. So it's chain 2, and here you need to turn. You'll work your stitches to that opposite end right here, where we'll join these two edges. I've worked my way to the end of this round right here. So I worked my last stitch into that second chain from chain 2. And now here I'm just continuing on working those stitches. I'll get into the stitch on the side as if I'm working it in one round. So that will enable me to join my 2 sides. So then I'll continue on with my stitches. All the way around until I get back to this edge here. I've continued on. Here's the join on the one side, and then I continued on with my stitches. Now I'm at this side where I had initially started off from. I worked my last stitch into that second chain from chain 2. Now to join on the opposite side into your second chain from chain 2, slip stitch. For my next round, it's chain 2, turn. Now you're continuing on as if you had been working in the round right through. So you're continuing on all the way around, and you'll slip stitch here to join. You'll work as many rounds as need be for the length of your sweater. Well, in my case, I'm working a sweater dress, so this is quite long. Keep in mind that when we're working our pockets will be at a slant. So you've got to work as many rounds in order to cover that pocket inner. So your pocket's going to come this way and around. You cannot work pockets straight on. You have to work them at an angle. So it's going to be quite long. So you've got to work just as many rounds in order to cover that pocket before working your ribbing. As I said, I'll be working many rounds to complete a sweater dress. Then I'll work the ribbing. If you haven't already, you can go ahead and work the sleeves as I explained in the tutorial for the basic raglan. And then I'll show you in a moment how to work these pockets. I've continued on with this raglan sweater dress, so I've worked my way to the length that I wanted it at. I worked my ribbings. I've also completed my sleeves. Now here I am. It's, you could say, the second last thing to do. It's just my pockets, and then I'll weave in all my ends. For the pocket, I'm working on the wrong side. So you're working this pocket inner. It's got to be worked on the wrong side. This is the wrong side of my sweater dress, and I'll attach yarn to my pocket opening, and right at the center of that pocket opening on the one side, as I have it here. For round 1, we're working single crochets all around this pocket opening. So you'll attach your yarn, bring it through, then it's chain 1, single crochet into that same space as chain 1. There are no stitches to work into around this edge here. You'll need to work all your stitches into the little gaps. The most important thing here is to keep your stitches evenly spaced. So you work your way all around this pocket opening. I've worked those single crochets all along this pocket opening. Here it is. So to end the round, into that first stitch, slip stitch to join. Now to continue on with this pocket, you need to keep track of which is the top edge of the pocket and which is the bottom edge of this pocket opening. The top edge will be that edge that runs in line with your underarm. So here's my underarm. That's the underarm, and this is the top edge. The bottom edge is the side that runs straight down to the ribbing at the bottom of your sweater. So keep in mind you have a top edge and a bottom edge. At this top edge, we will work only decreases. At the bottom edge, we will work only increases, and that will enable this pocket to slant in that direction. It will slant towards the bottom. If you work increases on the side, you'll have a pocket that is all askew. So you've got to keep your decreases on the top edge, the edge that's towards the underarm, and you've got to keep your increases to the bottom edge, the edge that's to the bottom ribbing of your sweater. So continuing on with round 2, here we're working double crochets. So it's chain 2, and you'll work your double crochets to that top edge. I've worked my way to that top edge. Now I need to work a decrease, and to work a decrease you need to have 2 stitches to work 1 decrease. So into the next 2 stitches I will yarn over, insert my hook into that first stitch, pull up a loop, insert my hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop. I have 4 loops on my hook, yarn over, go through 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. So here I've worked a decrease. I'll also use stitch markers as a guide just to mark off that decrease. Now I'm working double crochets along this edge to that bottom edge right there. I've worked those double crochets to this bottom edge right here. Into the stitch at this bottom edge, I will work 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, and that's our increase. So I'll just take a stitch marker and I'll place it into any one of those stitches. So here you see it's 2 stitches worked into 1. That's an increase. And then I'll continue on with double crochets to the end of this round. To end the round, slip stitch into that second chain from chain 2. Okay, for our next rounds, and notice that for this pocket I am not turning after every round. I'll just go ahead and work my pocket as it is. For the next round, that's round 3 of my pocket, it's exactly the same. It's chain 2. I'll work double crochets to that top edge here. I'll work a decrease here. I'll work double crochets to this bottom edge here. I'll work an increase at this point, and then it's double crochets to the end, and I'll slip stitch to join. So you're repeating round 2 until you've reached the length of your pocket inner. I continued on with those decrease increase rounds. So in total I worked 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 of those decrease increase rounds, and that will give me a nice depth for my pocket. I've still got 2 more rounds, 2 or so more rounds to work to close up on this pocket. So once you've worked to the depth that you'd like your pocket at, then it's chain 2. Now for this round, we're working decreases all the way around. You can remove those stitch markers as you no longer need them, and continue on with those decreases. I've worked those decreases and already you can see it closing up here. So to complete the round, it's slip stitch into that second chain from chain 2. For my next round, it's chain 2, and again I'll work decreases all the way around. You may find that for children's sizes, you may only need to work one of these decrease rounds. So it all depends on the width of this pocket, how many rounds of decreases you'll need to work. Here I am at the end of this round. I'll slip stitch into that second chain from chain 2 to join. Now I've just got a little gap here, and so that's fine. I'll fasten off and I'll seam that gap closed. With your yarn needle, seam that little gap closed. And as you saw, I left behind a long enough tail end to help with the seaming here. Okay, so that does it for this pocket. You can go ahead and work the second pocket in exactly the same way, and then you'll weave in all your ends to complete this raglan. And that does it for this tutorial. I'll just give you a look at that pocket from the right side. Okay, so here's the pocket from the right side. I've still got my tail ends to weave in, but this is the pocket inner, and it slants downwards, which is exactly what I wanted. You cannot make a pocket, a side pocket that's going straight or horizontally. It's got to be slanted. Yeah, so that does it for this tutorial. For those of you that are joining me for the first time on my channel, please do consider subscribing if you enjoyed this tutorial. And yeah, a big thank you for all of you that have already subscribed. Thank you for watching.